not too late. Got nothing on my brain. That's what people say. That's what people say. I go on too many dates, but I can't make them stay. At least that's what people say. That's what people say. But I keep moving, can't stop.
When I was in high school, a really good friend of mine came up with this idea. He said to me one day in class, "Hey, you know, they're hiring down at the pool. They need people to work in the concession stand. It'll be great. It's not a lot of work. We can just kind of hang out, enjoy the summer, maybe eat some candy that, you know, drops on the floor, something like that."
Please don't eat the candy that fell on the floor of a concession stand.
I was like, sure, that's great. Working with one of my best friends in kind of a low-key Jimmy Buffett type, you know, vibe place, that sounds fantastic. And it was, for about, you know, 50, maybe 55 seconds. And then my friend, he sort of transformed. He became this kind of real critic of everything, anything and everything that I would do. He would find a fault with it. And he always presented his critique like it was this question, deep philosophical question. Well, you know, I'd say, well, don't you think, you know, the floors could be scrubbed a little bit more? Don't you think that the Kit Kats would sell a little bit better if you positioned them right here instead of over there? But the kicker, I remember, was I was serving up a Hot Pocket. We saw a lot of Hot Pockets at concession stands. And he said to me, well, don't you think the Hot Pocket should be presented in a different way? I mean, shouldn't the presentation just be a little different for that dish? And I knew, well, there's no wrong way to serve up a Hot Pocket. That's kind of a hard fact right there. And I found out later that he was criticizing me because he wanted to apply to be a manager the following year. And so he was building up this case on why it should be him hired over me. He was pushing me down so he could lift himself up.
We're going to pause you right there. Welcome to Loops. Floor candy aside, thank you, Pastor Al. Pastor Al is the brand new pastor out at Zavea Lutheran and Eidsvold Lutheran across the river in Wisconsin. Really glad that he can join us. We're going to bring him back in a little bit, but first we're going to turn it over to Wendy Erickson.
When I mentioned to my husband that Brian had asked me to do a Loops talk on the Constant Critic, he laughed and said, well, they know your strengths. I mentioned to him that he was mumbling. The color of his shirt didn't really do him any favors, and he was late home for supper. And then I explained that really I was doing it on how to deal with the constant critic. Not that I am a constant critic. Why are some people always criticizing? Maybe they're insecure and their constant criticizing is just a form of bullying. Maybe they are socially inept and just don't know how to talk to people about things. Maybe they think they're superior and they actually know the right way to do things. I probably fall into that category myself. I want to share a story about Buddha, if that's allowed on a Christian video series. Anyway, a man has heard that Buddha cannot be riled. You can't make him mad or lash out at you. And he wants to test this. So he finds Buddha and he taunts him and he criticizes him. And he's just awful to Buddha. And Buddha just takes it. And when the man kind of runs out of steam, Buddha says, can I ask you a question? And the man said, sure, whatever. So Buddha says, if someone buys a person a gift and that person doesn't accept it, who does the gift belong to? And the man said, well, of course, it still belongs to the giver. And Buddha said, and isn't that the same if I don't accept your negativity and criticism? It still belongs with you. First, as in all things, we have to accept that we're responsible for our reactions. As Christians, we're called to react with grace. So whatever our reaction, we're not to make the other person feel bad or criticize them back. But we can choose not to accept their criticism. First, we acknowledge it. We look at it, is it true? Is it timely? What's the intent of the criticizer? And if none of those feel right, then you just don't accept it, as the Buddha says. By not taking things personally, you free up a lot of space for what you want to think about. So we acknowledge the criticism, not accept or agree, just acknowledge. Decide if we think it's true, and if true, we can adjust our behavior accordingly. But if not, we don't accept it. We can generally disregard any global criticisms when they start with, you always, or you never, or things like, women, you drive like all other women, they're all bad drivers, or men never ask for directions and you're always getting us lost. You can disregard that stuff. If someone is constantly criticizing me, it doesn't take me long to work them out of my daily life. There's no reason to put up with that kind of behavior toward yourself. It's okay to walk away from people who are trying to make you feel bad. Sometimes that's hard to do if they're part of your family or someone you work with, but if you can do it, gently walk away from them. Essentially, you have to decide for yourself what you'll accept for yourself. Hear it, decide if it applies, and if not, don't take it. As Buddha suggests, leave the gift with the giver.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Buddha. We're going to bring Wendy back at the end, but for now, we're going to turn it over to Pastor Al. Pastor Al is going to talk about a time that Jesus received some heavy criticism from the Pharisees in Luke chapter 6.
Luke 6 tells us that on the Sabbath, the day of complete rest, Jesus encountered a man with a withered hand. And the scribes and the Pharisees, they watched Jesus. They wanted Jesus to heal the man, to mess up and work on the Sabbath so they could hold it against him. So they didn't really care about the man or really the act of healing. The heart of their criticism was that they wanted to hold something against Jesus. It was all about pushing him down, because they thought if they pushed him down, they would lift themselves up in comparison. Now Jesus, he knew their thoughts. He knew what they were after, but he didn't call them out on it. I always find that interesting. Jesus doesn't rub their noses in it and say, hey, listen, here are 4 reasons that you're the worst. I want to tell you about them real quick. Instead, Jesus recenters everyone in the synagogue towards the bigger picture. He asks them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to destroy it? Jesus reminds his critics that we have a purpose in this world, a larger purpose. Some people criticize to lift themselves up. We go down so they go up. Some people criticize to get more out of you. They hand you requirements that you can never meet, a law system that can't be beat, because they have desires that they think you can fulfill for them. You can contribute to this perfection that they're chasing. But as Christians, we are not called to simply deal with the symptoms of brokenness, the fruits. Rather, we are called to address the brokenness as well, the hidden tree within us all. We are called to let all people know their true value in God's loving eyes, so they don't seek it in comparison with others. We are called to proclaim the gospel, the fulfillment of God's law on our behalf, so that we don't go around creating a whole new law, a whole new list of things to do and to refrain from doing for ourselves and for others. Perfection will not be found through any lists that we make and just try to check off. Knowing that, living that, takes a huge load off me, and takes a huge load off, let me tell you. In the end, if you cannot eradicate criticism from your life, and you won't be able to, try to keep yourself focused on the bigger picture, on where your loving, forgiving, redeeming God is calling you to be in this life. See, when we focus on God, all that other stuff has a way of fading off into the background.
Thank you, Pastor Al. Wendy, anything else to add? Oh, all right. Well, with that, we're going to stop talking, and it's time for you to turn to each other and have meaningful conversations about things that matter.
Shake it off, shake it off.